We wanted to talk about, we were chatting beforehand, spiritual intelligence. And I want to segue into that, this new modality you've been working on, with a little story for you. My son goes to a school based on Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, of which there are 8 currently sort of described: interpersonal, intrapersonal, kinesthetic, musical, linguistic, mathematical, different ways that we learn and interact with our world. And I just a few weeks ago had the sense that I should add a 9th intelligence to this, which would be called cosmic intelligence, which would be the sense.
Dude, it's coming through the ether, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's getting downloaded. That's amazing.
And so I was trying to think of fun little games that so these are elementary kids. I could have them practice telepathy, telephone, or I could have them practice moving little pieces of paper with their minds, or I could.
That's so rad, man.
Yeah. Just make it fun. That sounds like it's a little bit different than what you're talking about in terms of spiritual intelligence, but maybe you could talk about what it is that this framework you've come up with and why you're excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's as you might see, it's actually very much the same thing. The way that this came through for me was actually meeting my fiance about 1.5 years ago. She did not grow up spiritual at all. She did not grow up religious at all. She's what you might call an old soul. And when I met her, I was very surprised to hear that she didn't have any kind of spiritual background or religious background. She found Christianity at about 17 years old, I think. And this is just so classic old soul. She showed up to a church service because she was craving community and she wanted to connect with God. She always believed there was a God. And she would listen to the preacher, and just be like, oh, I don't resonate with all this separation stuff, but man, I love these worship services. So she would just go to church just to worship God and started listening to worship music and stuff. But she was like, Jesus died for my sins. I don't know about all that, but I love connecting with God. And so as I started to get to know her, she was just like the most grounded woman I'd ever dated. She would handle really intense situations with incredible patience and kindness. And I'd never seen her in 1.5 years we've been together. I've never seen her truly get angry at anything. And so I just said to her one day, like, I don't know if you know this, babe, but you have like a really high spiritual IQ. And I've thought about this question for a long time, because when I worked at Google, I was working with these software engineers, training them, who were just incredibly intelligent on the IQ scale, genius level for sure.
Yeah.
But they could barely interact socially. They didn't have much EQ at all. And I found that to be interesting, because it's like, well, you think that this person's smart, but they're almost mentally handicapped when it comes to social intelligence. I would, for example, like I had multiple clients who would do things like this. You just say, hey, brother, how was your weekend? When they would come in the gym, and they stop and they blink and stare at the ground. And then they look up and they say, it was good. And it took them like 10 seconds to think of that. And for the longest time, I didn't understand what was going on. But I started to realize that what they're doing is they're so always in this linear intelligence mode that when they are asked a simple question to connect with them emotionally, they don't see it as an opportunity for emotional connection. They see it as an opportunity to exchange information. So they think, what's the most accurate possible response I can make? So they have to go through the options in a linear fashion to think of what's the most accurate answer. And it ends up just being good. Good was the answer.
There's not much information there anyway.
Exactly. So it's like, oh, they're sort of stuck, right, in this one mode of intelligence. So I started thinking, like, clearly there's other modes of intelligence, not just IQ. What are they? And what could we say there's such a thing as a spiritual intelligence? Because that seems very obvious to me. That, the example I give in my video is like, you can be able to solve trigonometry equations in your head. You can be so intelligent intellectually, but have almost no self-awareness, right? Have a huge ego, be totally identified with your body, not aware of your habits at all or conditioning patterns. And so in thinking about what this question of what is spiritual intelligence, for the longest time, my answer would be, well, it's self-awareness. That's spiritual intelligence. And I think that that's a very good answer, and it's really close to the truth, but it sort of doesn't equate to one phenomenon, which is sort of like my fiance of this person doesn't know any spiritual concepts. They've never heard non-duality before, but they have this innate ability to be aware of themselves and to integrate what they're aware of. So like, even children sometimes they haven't studied any non-duality texts yet, but they have this really innate ability to be self-aware and to integrate that awareness. So I ended up arriving at the definition of spiritual intelligence is the capacity for self-awareness and integration. So it's like the capacity for the masculine and the feminine. Some people have studied non-duality for 20 years and they're very self-aware, but it took them 20 years to get that self-aware. And I just met, someone yesterday who doesn't have any spiritual background and they're pretty much on that same level of self-awareness. So how do I explain that? How do I describe that? The word capacity really resonates. And I think that probably has a lot to do with past lives and karmic experience, but clearly that is a different type of intelligence, not just to be self-aware, but to integrate and embody what you're aware of is also part of the equation, because one person might become aware of some negative pattern and take 2 years to fully integrate that. And another person takes 2 months to integrate that. So there's kind of two things we need to consider when we talk about it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing like your fiance like didn't have this conscious awareness of her spiritual intelligence, but she just had developed it and was using it, but didn't
even know she was using it. Yeah. It just didn't make sense to her to stress out about things when negative thoughts. I would ask her these questions like, how do you deal with negative thoughts? Because her family environment she grew up in was very negative. Her mom and sister are very much young souls, extremely identified with ego, lost in stories. And they would always look at her as like she was the most immature one because she wouldn't get involved in their stories and didn't care about all the drama. And I was like, oh no, it's very much the opposite, right? You're probably a very old soul who incarnated into a family of younger souls. And she was like, wow, that actually makes sense. I never knew that was a thing,
Yeah, that's super cool that you get to be with someone that helps you form a theory like this or form a framework.
Definitely, yes.